Everyone, welcome to the Beyond the Externals podcast, where we discuss mindset and leadership within the world of sports. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassie Preston, a mental performance coach and founder of CEP Mindset, and Chris DiPiero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in my junior days. And now we get to work together in the mental performance and leadership space. Chris, we were on fire this summer recording episodes, and this one was a doozy. I just really enjoyed Steve Spott. Why don't you team up? You know, you guys go way back. Really enjoyed this episode. Tell us a bit about him first before we talk about the episode.
Yeah, thanks, Cass. You know, one of the great things about the game of hockey is, or obviously, is the people you get to meet and connect with, and have friendships with. I've known Steve Spott since we were 10 years old, playing minor hockey together. In fact, we played minor soccer together. But we've, kind of went to high school for a bit together. So we've kind of known each other for a long, long time. And, through the game of hockey, you always stay connected. So Spotter played, junior hockey in the Toronto area, went to Colgate University on a scholarship. Actually, helped Colgate go to the NCAA finals one year, the only time they've ever made it to the final game. They lost, and unfortunately for them. After his career, playing college hockey, played a little bit in the East Coast League, played a little bit in Europe, played in the American Hockey League. So he's kind of played in a lot of different levels. And, and then he kind of got into coaching. He was a teacher by trade, and then got into coaching at Seneca College, and then some junior hockey, and then got an opportunity to coach in the Ontario Hockey League in Plymouth with Pete DeBoer. And so, him and Pete have had a tremendous relationship back from being, Pete being the head coach and Steve being the assistant coach in Plymouth, then in Kitchener. And then Pete went to the NHL, and Spotter took over the Kitchener Rangers as head coach. And they did that for a number of years, had a successful career there, coaching Canada's national junior team. So, he kind of ascended to the heights of, within Hockey Canada as well. And then he, went to the American Hockey League, coached the Toronto Marlies for a season, became assistant coach with the Leafs, and then became assistant coach in San Jose back with Pete, Las Vegas with, again with Pete DeBoer, and currently in Dallas with the Dallas Stars. So Spotter's got a long hockey history, a lot of experience, just a really affable, very friendly guy, a lot of experience, as I said, but just a great way to articulate his experiences in the game from all these different levels. And, certainly it was a great discussion, both personally, I think, and obviously professionally for the podcast. So I think the listeners will get a lot out of this. And, kind of for yourself, what did you glean out of this discussion?
Yeah, no, I definitely enjoyed it. And I just like the way he carries himself on a high level, a very personal guy. And I think, and he talked about it even within it, like, and he got it from Paul Maurice, when you don't know, you don't BS a player. And you could tell he's very, he's going to tell it how it is, comes across as like really cares about how he communicates. And he even talked about like some of the keys to being a great player is their ability to not just work hard and have the technical expertise, but also that ability to communicate is actually such a fundamental thing that he encouraged. So I really enjoyed the conversation. We talked about a lot of the mindset importances and for athletes to really surround themselves with those resources and people really starting to embrace more the mental side of the game within hockey, which is great to see and get that support from his side. And then obviously, really talked a lot about confidence with players and then coaches being careful with the abuse of power and those kind of things, which, we see a lot, unfortunately, still at the different levels. But yeah, I had a handful of takeaways. What are some of your final thoughts here before we let the listeners just dive right in?
Yeah, I like to echo the concept of the communication piece. I think more so now than ever, the ability to communicate, not just, hey, this is what we're doing, but why. NHL coaches have to, understand and explain why they're doing things. And so it's a great lesson for coaches of all ages to understand that from, and understand how to communicate that properly. But he also said technical expertise, especially at that level, is paramount, right? Because the players will sniff that out. And then we talked, I think maybe you asked about the idea. I mean, I asked him about, over all of his experiences, what are the commonalities of those players that he saw that have made it? And he mentioned without fail, he just said competitiveness and the ability to compete. So, talent's one thing, But if a player doesn't have that ability to compete for their space, compete for their ice time, compete for anything, that they want within the game, they aren't going to move on and move to the next level. So I thought that was a great takeaway. The other piece I wanted to make sure, it's kind of interesting how he said, like, there's 23 multimillionaire companies that they're responsible for.
Yeah.
And so it's a great way to understand what goes through, an NHL head coach or an NHL coaching staff and what they're responsible for in terms of, everybody has their kind of roles and responsibilities, and indicated that, how Pete DeBoer is a master at sort of delegating, understanding the leadership component. It's certainly an interesting takeaway for me, for sure.
Yeah, no, so many great nuggets, a really good insight to an NHL coach that's been around for a while, very successful, very nice guy, like, enjoyable to listen and chat with. So encouraging, obviously, coaches, but players will get tons out of this, and parents as well. So make sure, if you enjoy the podcast, subscribe, like, comment, send us any questions you have any, and enjoy this episode as we keep going beyond the X's and O's.
Enjoy, everybody. Well, thanks, Spotter, for joining Cass and I on the Beyond the X's and O's podcast here. Usually, it's just a dialogue about hockey, but obviously Beyond the X's and O's. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our long history. You and I have kind of known each other since I think we were 10 or 11. We played hockey together, played soccer together. Your dad was one of our soccer coaches. So we've got this long history and friendship. So I certainly want the listeners to understand that and that connection. But that's the beauty of the game, is that we can maintain this friendship and this length of time. People that know you as being a very affable and friendly guy, very knowledgeable in what you do. You've had a tremendous amount of experiences both on the playing side, but mostly through coaching and leadership and whatnot. Because we'll touch upon a lot of that stuff as we discuss things, but in a kind of a quick synopsis, if you can give the listeners a brief history of Steve Spott.
Well, yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on, Cass and Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast. I think you touched on it best, Chris, where you talked about what the game offers all of us, not only on the ice, but off the ice. Friendships that start at 6, 7, 8 years of age. And have lasted a lifetime. And I think that's the great thing about the game, is that it does bring people together. One thing I've learned in hockey, brings out the best in people, and sometimes it can bring out the worst in people at the same time. And we're very fortunate, you and I, that we've had so many incredible relationships that have been built throughout the years. And I think St. Mike's has been a big part of that. Both having attended St. Mike's, both having played as minor hockey players in St. Michael's Arena. There's just a bond there. I think that guys that went there understand the bond that goes with it. So, it's great being here today, but I don't take for granted the relationships that you and I have, and obviously we've built together over a lifetime.
Yeah, it's great to, I appreciate you saying that. And in full disclosure, Cass is a St. Mike's grad as well. So
yes.
we've got this going. But it's interesting, so you played junior hockey in Toronto, got a scholarship to Colgate University, played college hockey, and then played some pro as well. So I think that's kind of important to understand. You played in the American League, played in Europe, and you've had this kind of playing experience behind you as well. At what point in time did you make that transition from player to coach?
When I went to Colgate, I did my BA in education. My goal was always to be a high school principal. That was kind of my Stanley Cup. If I could teach, and then one day become a principal, that would be fantastic. When I came back to Toronto after my playing career, I was substitute teaching in the Metro Separate School Board, and I had a gentleman by the name of Don Bannon. Said, he was in the board, and he said, we have a son that plays minor hockey with the Young Nats, and would you consider maybe trying coaching? And I was still a young guy at that time, and it was great. I started coaching in the GTHL, or the MTHL, as you and I know, Chris, way back. And I just got the bug. What it allowed me to do was combine two passions, teaching and coaching. and staying involved in the game. And in the locker room before the game, I still got that pit in my stomach wanting to compete, even as a coach. So I remember feeling that maybe I can do this, where I can, get the best of both worlds in coaching, be around the game, still be a part of development and teaching, seeing people, move on in their careers. So for me, it was the best of both worlds, and just really, really fortunate to have grown up to the opportunity to work in the National Hockey League now. But it all started in Toronto, in minor hockey.
So I know, Cass, you want to jump in. So just for younger coaches that listen, here you are, you're coaching minor hockey. Did you ever think you're going to end up being a coach in the National Hockey League back then?
No, you don't. And you know what? And you can attest to this, because we grew up together. We didn't have dads that opened doors for us in the game. Everything that you and I got through the game was through hard work, taking chances, taking risks, donating time, being a part of different programs. I can remember way back when, we did the Ontario under-17 program together, GTHL coaches clinics, and just trying to learn and get better. But I remember when I was a young coach, you'd hear Ken Hitchcock speak, or Mike Babcock speak, or Mike Johnson speak, and you never thought you could be in that same group of people. It wasn't in the cards for me. And very fortunate to do what I do. But for the athletes and the coaches that are listening to this, I think I'm a good testament of somebody that didn't have a door open for me, that I took some risks. I donated a lot of time. I was on the ice a lot. I was in classrooms a lot. I was in university seminar rooms a lot, either presenting or in as a participant, and just made sure as I grew, that I tried to make smart decisions, and was able to get there. But at the same time, as I said, it wasn't if someone opened a door for me and said, here's a job in the National Hockey League. It was little by little, and it all started in minor hockey. So it is achievable for any young coach, male or female, to do what I'm doing right now.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think you've got such a great amount of experience now. Like, think about your own mindset as and your leadership responsibilities when you were a player, and then transitioning to that, to this, even like the pursuit of a coaching career is just quite a challenging one, as you're alluding to. And then you also get so there's your mindset there, your mindset as a player, but then even just like now coaching and guiding people as a coach around their mindset, I know is always going to be a big part of what you do, and you get to see it firsthand, the players and the ups and the downs, and the challenges that they go through. My first question would just be like, what's the biggest thing, why do you feel like that's so important? How's it applied to you and your experiences and your vast amount of experiences at these different levels and the different points of your life and career? Anything that stands out, like, yeah, this is, been a big part of my success or my journey, or what I see as important for athletes, or what people are going through as they climb the ranks, whether it is in the pursuit as an athlete, but let alone in the pursuit as a coach or in any other endeavor in life, to climb the ranks. Does anything come out pretty open-ended question, but I think it's
It is
an interesting one to start with.
But I think there's three facets that come off that, Cassidy. I think hard work is essential. If you get labeled as a person that doesn't work hard, you're in trouble. Having a technical expertise in what you're doing. And I don't care if you're coaching in the National Hockey League, if you're a police officer, if you're a plumber, you have to have an expertise in what you do. And then for me, in our particular profession, the ability to communicate. So I think the three facets are all intertwined, where you have to have a work ethic, you have to have a technical expertise, and you have to have the ability to communicate. You cannot, and I'm telling you, you cannot be a coach in the National Hockey League if you don't have the ability to communicate. And from that, there's 100 different ways we can go on this, but some communicate differently than others. But it's the ability to get the most out of each one of those 23 athletes every day. And there's different ways we go about that. But for me, Cassidy, those are the three elements. It's a work ethic, it's a technical expertise, and it's also, the ability to communicate, that I think are critical to get where I'm sitting right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to jump in, because we just had Mike McKenzie on earlier this week, and he was really talking about the work ethic piece and the key of the mindset. And a lot, you think it'd be easy that a lot of players would just show up, work hard day in, day out. and that
Right.
they often don't, and the fears or the noise in their head. And I also really like the communication piece, which, and I'm sure Chris will prime a lot about, like with that's leadership 101, is the effectiveness in communicating and understanding yourself and what you're about, and knowing how to communicate and connect with others. So I like the simplicity of those three things, and they really apply whether you're a coach, but even just think of like the players you have. You want them to be hard workers, know their craft, and be able to communicate with their teammates to their coaches. That's going to make them great players on their team and their pursuits. What if you had to pick out of those three things, what's maybe the one that you've had the hardest time with, or had to grapple with or learn the most, or maybe shift the question more to like the athletes that you coach and you see coming up the ranks and at the NHL level that are most important for them to work on? And then I'll throw it back to you, Chris.
You know what? I think it's interesting. I think going through, Colgate, getting my BA in education, you've already got the ability to stand in front of a group or an audience, whether it be 15 kids in grade 1 or 23 NHL players. You have some form of ability to communicate with your class. But from there, you have to make sure that what we're talking about, I learned a long time ago. Paul Maurice, who's the head coach in Florida, I just got hired to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I was talking to Paul Maurice at the NHL draft. This is going back 10 years. And he said to me, the best advice I'll give you, spotter, is that if you don't know at this level, don't BS the players. You know what? Dion Phaneuf was our captain with the Toronto Maple Leafs. If I didn't know something, if he asked me a technical question, rather than me making it up and not being sure, no, Dion, I'm not sure. Let me find out and I'll get back to you. So I think that it's the honesty. It's having that ability to communicate with those players. And then the second part is our game has really grown. It's not the same game technically 10 years ago as it is today. So you really have to stay up with the curve. You have to know what's cutting edge. I'm a power play coach. I have to know what other teams' penalty kills, trends, what's going on in the National Hockey League, what's going on in the international game. What can we do every day on our power play or on our 5-on-5 offensive side of the game do to get better? So I think it's staying up with the curve technically, and then finding new ways to communicate with what I'll call today's athlete. It's not the same athlete as it was when I broke in the NHL 10 years ago.
From that standpoint, Spot, I mean, and that's what I wanted to get into, the idea that, based on, where you've coached and the experience that you've had from, major junior in Plymouth with the Whalers to Kitchener Rangers, and then obviously not, your NHL experience. What has been, and again, this is a kind of a hothouse question, but what has been kind of the biggest shift in the athlete that you're coaching? Like, and I think that's, like you say, like, I mean, everybody, we see, I always battle with this one, because we always say, oh yeah, athletes are different today than they were yesterday. And I often wonder if coaches that coached us said that back in the day. Oh, these kids today aren't the same as they were. So does every coach, or does every series of coaches, like a generation of coaches, do they have that same comment? Or, ultimately, what have you seen as being the biggest change with the athlete?
I think there's two parts to that, Chris. I think the use of technology in the game. We are now dealing with young athletes that the use of technology, whether it be analytics and or the ability to view themselves and or team through video or numbers, has changed over the last 10 years. And you know what? I deal with 23 multi-million-dollar companies every day. 23 individual multi-million-dollar companies every day. And what can I do to help that company progress or get better? And you've got Joe Thornton, and who I had in San Jose, and now you got Wyatt Johnson, who's 19 years of age. And that is a huge shift in coaching or communicating. With Jumbo, you can go, or Joe Thornton, you can go to a whiteboard, draw it up. Joe, here's what I'm looking at. Here's what I want you to do. Boom, gone. Wyatt Johnson, I wouldn't do that with. I would sit, watch video, either his shift or someone else, and watch maybe through video. Sure, we use whiteboards. Sure, we still, draw things up on a rink board on a wall. but I would say 9 times out of 10, guys, now it's the technological advancement analytically through a video that now we use to help these athletes progress it and get better. And I'll tell you what, they want to get better. All 23 want to get better because they know what's at stake financially for themselves, and obviously as a team, the opportunity to have success as a team.
I want to jump in because I think it's a really interesting take and narrative. It's like, I don't know if this resonates, but it's like you're a consultant to 23 different businesses. It's like that are, you know, where that they're all interconnected too. Like they are dependent to some degree on each other, but they're still their own private, you know, firm, you know, or business that they got to take care of themselves. And so how, you know, and it's big business. It's not like, you know, little business. And so I think, you know, what's your narrative around that? And how do you go and approach, you know, the nuance within that and the team dynamics and the hierarchy and these different things within a team? Is anything insights you want to or can share around that? Because I think that was a really cool insight you shared.
Yeah, I think, you know, Pete DeBoer and I have been together for 30 years now. Pete's the head coach of the Dallas Stars. And, you know, he has the ability, he has to deal with all 23 players from a different desk or a different angle than I do. My job has always been to make sure the messaging from Pete to our players or from Pete to our locker room is consistent. And, you know, that's why it's always worked. Unfortunately for Pete, he sometimes has to be the bad cop. Very rarely do I have to be the bad cop. It's an easier job as an assistant coach because, you know, they lean on me differently than they would Pete, because Pete's the principal, say, of the high school, you know, where I'm the faculty member or the teacher. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic when it comes to how we run the locker room. And saying that though, Cass, I think for me, it's knowing what all 23 players need to improve. And all 23 are different. Some are married, some are single, you know, some are, you know, are going through a divorce, some are, you know, dealing with some personal loss at home, whatever it might be. There's something every day. And I think the players that, you know, we do best with are the ones that have a trust, a foundation of trust with us, that, yes, I want you to do well in the power play. Yes, I want you to defend hard. Yes, I want you to stop the puck of our goalie. But I also care about how your dad's doing at home or your mom's doing at home, or how's your son doing at his first day of kindergarten. So it's finding that balance with our athletes to know that when they come in, that there's a level of trust, a foundation of trust with us, that we not only want them to help us win a Stanley Cup, which is the ultimate goal on the ice, but also we care about them as people, and we care about them off the ice as well.
The thing I want to kind of dive in on that, and I love that because there's that balance, like you say, right? Obviously, and that's where performance comes in, being able to kind of have that foundation of trust. Any relationship, I think, has that foundation. In your coaching life and in your coaching journey, what has been the biggest growth in your leadership, your ability to understand like the athletes that you're dealing with in that moment?
Yeah, I think confidence, Chris. I think when you first start out, you're dealing with these world-class athletes. It's just having confidence in yourself that you can sit down with a Patrick Marleau. You can sit down, you know, if it's Sheldon Keefe with an Austin Matthews, and having confidence in yourself that they know you are capable of helping them individually, and you are capable to help the team win a Stanley Cup. So I think confidence is a big part, and it's not a cockiness. There's a very fine line there where you have to have a level of confidence in how you communicate with them. And Chris, sometimes it's hard news. Sometimes it's, you know what, you're not on the power play tonight, Chris, and the reason is because of this. Or Chris, you're going down to Austin in the American Hockey League, or the Marlies in the American Hockey League because of this. And it has to be honest. It has to be, this is the reason, so that the athlete has the opportunity to fix it and then come back up, or the opportunity to get back on the power play. So with us, it's confidence in our abilities, and at the same time, having the ability to have honest conversations with players at our level, because they need to know. There's a lot on the line, as you guys well know. So it's having that honest conversation and the confidence to have that honest conversation with the athletes, so they know what they need to improve or get better.
Yeah, I think that's obviously, you know, that's awesome, especially, I mean, at your level where, you know, you're dealing with professionals and whatnot, and that is paramount. How does that still ring true in terms of, let's say, at the junior level, or, you know, like how do you how do you kind of bring that down in
Yeah.
a different way let's say at a younger age, junior, college, minor hockey, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about that. Just, I think for a minor hockey coach, a college coach, a junior coach, um, we really have to be careful with what I'll call the abuse of power. And we have a lot of power over athletes. They come into our locker rooms, they come into our seminar rooms, and they want to play at the highest level. They want to help their teams win. They want to please their moms and dads. There's an awful lot going on. So I think for me, now that I can look back a little bit, it's not abusing, and I'll use the word power. It may or may not be the right word, but authority that we have over those 15 young athletes, male or female, because they want to please us, they want to please themselves, they want to please their parents. So it's just having that, I think, ability, Chris, to recognize that if you are coaching a 15 or 16-year-old young man or woman, that you're able to get the most out of them without that abuse of power, because they are looking at you for answers. They're looking at you to get better. They're looking at you to help please yourself, the team, that we don't abuse that power or authority that we have as young coaches.
Yeah, I want to jump in because I think that's, one of the things, we've had some chats before, and just knowing Chris and your narrative spotter, I think, and who you are, what you're about, is very much caring for the athletes, taking, not this old school demeaning, abusive approach, but actually, coming from that teacher first approach. It's like, hey, what's going to serve the people that I'm coaching and leading. And I think, within that, a couple of ways to maybe go with this question is around, the athletes themselves, especially at this level, but at all levels, and especially at this level, the environment's already extraordinarily challenging. There's the pressures, the expectations, the adversity, like just the competitiveness at that level is a challenge in and of itself. And let alone then when you add on coaches that aren't being honest or transparent, which is unfortunately still quite prevalent to some degree. Like we see it all the time. It's like just this lack of communication and clarity, and not honesty, and like where they sit or what they can work on, and their progress. And so it's always refreshing and inspiring to hear when, that is a priority and what you're speaking to and saying it quite well. And you can just tell like your demeanor is not around your own ego or around like just the winning, but actually guiding and helping the athletes and what serves them. So long-winded way to get to, one of two ways. What do you see some of the challenges and the athletes coming up, and the coaching, or the, what's adding to and making things worse from an environment or toxic coaching kind of standpoint, or just on the other side is just how you're helping them deal with that environment and the challenging environment in and of itself, and your approach there. So, because I'm not sure which one you might want to speak to more, but they're kind of both around the same idea.
And I think, Cassidy, for us at our level, and I think I can speak for the Canadian Hockey League. I know I can speak for the NCAA. It's having resources of people around you that if there's a void in my ability to get to an athlete or make sure that that athlete is getting better, I'm not getting to that athlete. There's a gap in communication. We've tried video. We've tried sitting them in the press box. We've tried being as positive as we can. It's the sports psychologists now that come into play. It's that person that we are fortunate to have resources to, that we can have a player go and speak to say, listen, what can I do to get better? I can't just talk to the coaches. I need to speak to somebody else. This is what's going on in my life. It's affecting me at the rink. So I think no matter what, our athletes today, I don't care what level, they need to have access to people that if it's too much, that they can rely on to vent, to have the ability to just let it all out and come in and try to be refreshed. At our level every day, the best comparison I can have is, a game in October in the NHL is no different than playing in a Memorial Cup final, which is once a year if you're lucky. But that's 80 plus times for me. That's the pressure you're dealing with every night. And not only us, the coaches, the players, it's on everybody. So I think it's the access to people, Cassidy, where We can help our athletes check every box, eliminate all excuses that if we can't get you, maybe there's someone else that can help you, whether it's a sports nutritionist, a strength and conditioning coach, whoever it might be that can help you continue to improve. And I think that's really important in today's athlete, that they have access to people to help with their mental training. That is a huge shift in the game right now. That mental part of our game is so important.
I love that. And maybe my only other follow-up, and I think that's such a huge way to look at, like, hey, we want to build a team and resources versus just be the heroes of everyone else's story. It's like, no, lean on other people.
Yeah.
And how much is that beneficial as a coaching staff? I know you were alluding to it actually a bit before off air, how much you lean on and give insight and find resources outside of, what you already know. You're just this constant learning and evolution as coaches too. And like you said, the feeling the pressure as a coach is definitely a real thing too. So seeing yourself as a high performer, how much does that resonate?
It does, but it's also having the confidence, as I talked about earlier, or it's also having the humility to know that you can also use other people as a coach, and we use them too. It's not peaches every day for us when we go. You've lost 3 in a row. It's knowing what we need as coaches. It's knowing that what our players need, our staff, because we're not only managing 23 athletes, we're also managing strength and conditioning people, equipment people, medical people. These are billion-dollar, not million, billion-dollar companies now. So, there's a lot that goes into that. So it's managing people. And if you can do it well, you can have success. If you struggle with it, it could fall apart like a Lego set, where there's going to be deficiencies in a department. And if there's a deficiency in one department, it's going to affect another. So I think it's that consistency every day. There's meetings, there's leadership meetings, there's department meetings, that everybody's on the same page at all times. And Pete DeBoer is a master at it. Jim Nill is a master at it, where they're able to get everybody on the same page so that everybody's pulling in the same direction.
Yeah, I love that, because I just think that's such a kind of known aspect of what you say coaches do or general managers do, right? And being able to, there's obviously the product on the ice, but there's this behind the scenes aspect that goes into the product on the ice. And I personally think that's not just, that's NHL, that's American League, it's East Coast, it's everywhere, right? And I think a lot of coaches just want to, kind of focus on their technical development and say, okay, this is the product on the ice, but it's this dressing room culture that they have to create, and the environment they have to create around that I think is important, that you just spoke to. I want to shift a little bit here, Spotter, and because I think it's important that the listeners also understand that you had tremendous success internationally as a coach, Team Canada, Hockey Canada with the under 18 program, the World Junior program. And where I want to go with this is really about, you've seen a lot of athletes wanting to pursue a professional career at that, we'll call it 16 to 20 age range in your coaching leadership career at that time. Some you knew right away were going to be pros. Some you weren't sure, and some I'm sure you probably thought never, but they did. Tell me about the difference, or what is, and I don't want you to be specific about who, but what are the, kind of the common thread lines of those who do make it, whether they're superstars or they're the ones that come from way behind and are able to make it, and then the ones who don't? Like, what's the yin and yang there?
I was dealing with Rugby Canada recently. They're revamping some of their program with Rugby Canada, and we were talking about that, Chris. And I said, competitiveness is so important, that you and I can have the same ability. We can have the same size, the same blueprint, the same skating, the same ability to score and or defend and or stop the puck. Competitive people at our level is so important. And you have been behind a bench with world-class players, and you see they don't make it for some reason, where the player that, you weren't sure, but they're really highly competitive, that somehow they find a career in the National Hockey League or in Europe or in the American League because they're competitive people. So for me, once you check all of the boxes, all of them, you're going to get to competitiveness. And if that athlete is competitive, male or female, there's a chance for that athlete to have success because they're going to learn. They're going to figure out, okay, that's our forecheck. Okay, this is who I have to defend. This is who I have to make contact with, whatever it is. If they're competitive people, it gives them a chance. If they're not competitive, they're going to have difficulty unless they are that talented, God-given ability that they can get by that without competitiveness. So for me, and that's something I talked to the person I was dealing with Rugby Canada, is that find competitive athletes. If they have that, there's a chance that they can have success and your team can have success. That to me is really, really important, Chris.
Love it.
I want to jump in. I love that. And it's funny because, you know, you can definitely see a young athlete. Oh, they've got the competitiveness, they've got the fire. And then I've also, you know, had unique perspectives where I'll see an athlete that they kind of have lost it, or maybe they don't have it fully nourished yet, but then they can start to, you know, learn or adopt and embrace that competitive narrative and grow. What's been your experience in seeing, you know, because obviously the ones that like is just kind of born a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's just like, and I even use that sometimes. My younger daughter, I was just like, she's just a little nut bar. It's just, I could see that. But I've seen, you know, how much have you seen maybe someone was like, maybe they didn't quite have it at 16, they're competitive, but then all of a sudden things clicked at 18 and now they got the full competitive juice. Have you seen much of that? Not that it's an overly coachable trait, but
Right.
nonetheless, it sometimes it takes certain environments or something to click, and then they can tap into that a bit more. Does anything come out into your mind speaking to the, you know, making sure harnessing and creating the right environment and the right context? Because it's also obviously the opposite is true, where someone's super competitive and then doesn't know how to manage their emotions and just flares out and boils too hot and doesn't, you know, have the emotional regulation to stay composed under adversity and pressure. So I think that's a very interesting discussion. I'd like to hear your insights on.
Yeah, and it's a fine line, Cassidy. I think,
Yeah.
you know, it's the ability again for those players that are ultra competitive to know how to harness it, when to use it, when not to use it. But it's amazing. Yeah, I always tell the story about Mike Richards. Mike Richards played for Peter DeBoer and I in Kitchener. He was our captain. He won a Memorial Cup. He's gone on. He's won Stanley Cups. He's won World Junior gold medals. He's won an Olympic gold medal. He's won a Calder. He's won every conceivable ring in hockey outside of a men's world championship because his teams were always in the playoffs. So think about it. He's won every ring. We got to Kitchener, and Mike was 16 at the time and was not the biggest player on the ice, was not the fastest player on the ice. And we thought, good Lord, what have we done? You know, that's our first round pick. What have we done? And then the exhibition game started, and then the regular season started. And when there was a puck in the corner, and Chris probably can attest to this, Mike Richards was probably coming out with that puck. Or if there was a puck in the crease, Mike Richards was going there to get it. If there was a situation where he had to defend himself physically or a teammate, Mike Richards was there to fight Corey Perry in London. And those are the guys that they just have that I call it, inside them, that they may not be the most skilled or the most talented, but they have something inside that just will not deny them the opportunity to try to fulfill their dreams. Then there's the other side of it, where you can see the players like Connor McDavid, who not only has that competitiveness, but the God-given ability and the skill level. He's got both. That is just rare air. That's Michael Jordan level. You know, that's rare air. So that's not something we deal with every day. We have Joe Pavelski in Dallas, who's very much like a Mike Richards, where not the biggest guy on the ice, not the fastest guy on the ice, but just has the innate ability to know where to go to score. And he's highly, highly competitive. And that bodes well. That goes to a Wyatt Johnson. It just continues to matriculate down with regards to that. So I just think some players have that inner drive, that inner competitiveness that allows them to get where they want to get. And then you've got the rare air guys that have the skill and the competitiveness, and they're superstars. That's what makes a superstar.
I love when you're articulating about this, because I think coaches out there sometimes overlook the Mike Richards of the world, or you know, I mean, in Oshawa we had, you know, Boone Jenner and right. Kind of right, who's captain of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and It's that ability, some kind of coaches look at it and say, okay, well, maybe he doesn't skate well, as you said. Maybe Mike Richards, he's not big enough, or he's not, toe dragging and doing all this great skill stuff. And they overlook that stuff. And I really believe the one thing I always like to talk to coaches about is sometimes you got to trust your gut. And sometimes there are players that are important to you and what you want. So how important do you feel like in terms of a coach kind of developing not so much a philosophy, because that everybody talks about developing a philosophy, but having a sense of the types of players that they want? Because I've seen through just my experiences, but also my studying of coaches, is that there's always coaches that latch on to a specific type of player at a specific role that other coaches may not. And it's important, I think, for the athlete to understand that, but I also think it's important to coaches that you can't build a team with 20 Connor McDavids.
No. You know what? When I was younger and about 30 pounds lighter, I used to like to go to the Mandarin. And if you go to a buffet and all they've got is, noodles, all they've got is rice, all they've got is chicken, it's not great. It's okay. But if there's 30, of the same at a buffet, it's not great. It's sprinkling a little different in everything. It's the dessert, it's the entree, it's the appetizer, so that it's a great experience. And it's no different than a player, Chris. The players have to have a little everything in them. They can't just be, one way. And the coaches that can find that can see, yeah, he has a skill level, she has a skill level, but boy, she's also competitive. And I see something in her. I can see her leadership. I can see his leadership. They don't slam the door when they're coming to the bench after a tough shift. That to me makes a great player, where you can see that there's a little everything inside there, not just the pure speed, because you might have pure speed, but you can't think the game. You just can't process quick enough, So it's finding that athlete that has a little bit of everything, that can have a ton of success. Because at our level, our fourth line player, our sixth defenseman, our backup goaltender is still a world-class player. And they have to do a little everything well, and then have that one it might just be taking faceoffs, but something special that allows them to stay at our level. And and I've seen it, Chris, you and I have worked a number of hockey schools. You can tell an athlete just by how they line up to do a drill. You go to the whiteboard, you draw up the drill, that little boy or little girl that goes to the front of the line, they're not worried about messing it up. They're going first. And then you maybe have the kids in the middle of the line that are, okay, let me see how that drill works. And then the kids at the back of the line that are like, okay, when it's my turn, I'll go. So it's amazing the dynamic that you can pick out just from how kids line up to do a drill, whether it be in the gym, in a classroom, or on the ice doing a drill. It's amazing to see how kids, they're formulated as they get older, just in how they line up before a drill. And I've noticed that over my career. It's incredible to see how that, and it's funny to see the kid in the back of the line that slowly moves his or her way up to the middle and then maybe to the front. Those are the kids that are really special.
Love it.
And that's that maturity and the getting comfortable with themselves, confidence, like you referred to. So I love it. I've got so many insights out of this, Spotter, and I appreciate the time. I want to be mindful. What is there anything else you want to make sure to share with coaches out there, parents, athletes rising the ranks, when it comes to mindset, leadership, anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to make sure to maybe bring up today, or anything you want to double down on?
You know what I think, it's a great question, Cassie. I think, we had the opportunity this year. We played the Minnesota Wild in the playoffs. And I said, I wish every parent from Canada could have been our bench just to see the level of play, physicality, competitiveness with the Dallas Stars against the Minnesota Wild in a 7-game series, how hard it is. And the game is so great now. There's so many different avenues to stay involved in the game. It's very difficult to play in the National Hockey League. But there's refereeing, there's coaching, there's managing, there's physiotherapists, equipment people. There's so many different avenues in the game. And for the moms and dads, enjoy the ride, because it's so hard. And if your son or daughter has a chance to play in the Olympics one day, get a scholarship, play major, junior, awesome. but enjoy the ride. We're so fortunate in our country to have what I think is the greatest game in the world. But enjoy the ride, because to get to play in the National Hockey League is very difficult. So, enjoy it. And that to me is the biggest thing. And for the coaches out there, as we talked about that abuse of power, understand the athletes are looking at you for leadership. The athletes are looking at you to get better, to help them win, and don't abuse that. Obviously take that very, very serious, and just do the best to get the best out of your boys or girls, no matter what level that you're at, and recognize that.
I love that. And I want to just make two comments. I think one around the abuse of the power thing too, is sometimes coaches aren't even aware that they might be doing it because maybe that's how they were coached, bring it up. And so I think that's such a great point that you brought up numerous times. And then especially for the parents and the athletes and even coaches as their experience, one of the most fundamental things from a mindset standpoint is that shift of like, okay, well, why I'm doing this is just for the results versus, no, that's my goal and my intent. It might be my external why, but my why is more connected to the experience and enjoying the journey and the intrinsic drivers, like, just like the enjoyment I had when I was a kid. Yeah. And so I love that you brought that up, and having the perspective to see that, because the freaking goals are hard. Like it's not like, just do this and guarantee going to, like, it doesn't quite work that way. It is very challenging. So, and even for the athletes at those levels, for them to keep maintaining the perspective and not get caught up in all the money and the noise and the clutter, and stay connected to the competitiveness and the experience and the journey. It's practical at all levels. So really like that you brought that up. Maybe Chris, I'll throw it to you. Any final thoughts, questions as we start to wrap up here?
No, I'm great. I mean, Spott, this has been awesome. Really appreciate the conversation, and really appreciate you taking the time, to be honest with you. I know it's as we kind of ramp down the summer, and your time is valuable as the season starts, and once you get going, like you say, it's pedal to the metal. So we certainly appreciate you taking the time, and your insights and your experiences, I think, are valuable to everybody who's listening, and it's great to have you on, and great to reconnect, and wishing you and Pete the best this year with the Dallas Stars. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for having me on, guys. It's it's such an important topic. And I just hope, if we can touch one coach, then we've done our jobs here this morning. I think it's really, really an important topic that we've got to continue to promote, and find positive ways to help coaches and athletes continue to improve and continue to enjoy the game. So again, thanks so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Steve.
Thanks, guys.